It ain't the left side or the right side, then it must be the FinSide. It ain't the left side or the right.
Thank you, Solo D. Welcome to another episode of On the FinSide here with Kat and Paul. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Spreaker, iTunes, YouTube, iHeartRadio, and Spotify. Check out our merch store on the FinSide.threadless.com. I'm Brian Cat NFL, and Paul is Fanatic_pick on Twitter. We are 3 months away from the NFL draft. Senior Bowl week has just wrapped up, the entire week, Tuesday through Thursday, as well as the game. But before we get into that, Paul, I've got to get something off my chest and get your opinion on. We've talked on this show many times about how the NFL draft, when the picks are set and they're announced, the NFL never quite has its stuff together as far as getting to the next pick, showing the highlights, that whole sequence on ESPN and the NFL Network. And now this year in the 2020 draft, they are actually going to use boats. What do you make of this?
Well, three things I make of this. For one, I hope to God one of these big bastards gets sick from being seasick, floating across the water there, and pukes on Goodell's shoes, just to teach him that this was a stupid idea. Two, I hope somebody accidentally turns the damn fountains in front of Caesar's on in the middle of the draft and just throws this whole thing for a frickin' loop. And three, I kind of sort of hope the boats aren't built to hold Mekhi Becton's big ass. That's me.
I'm right there with you on that. This seems like a lawsuit waiting to happen. I mean, you can't even get Pat McKinley from the Falcons a few years ago, probably sailing across without screaming the F-bomb 3 times and breaking a bunch of FCC regulations. But that's besides the point. Let's get to the Senior Bowl. This is a week that we put a lot of stock into, and I emphasize week because the game itself is about 5% of what actually matters. Not the same talent as last year as far as the week itself, because you had 10 first-rounders out of 32. Probably won't see 10 this year, but you're probably going to see 5 to 7 if I had to guess at this point. And the big news of the week was, or the big story of the week as far as it relates to where the Dolphins are picking 5th overall in the draft, is Justin Herbert and Jorden Love were both there. And both of them appear to have had a very solid week, a very solid game too. And, it's nobody really stuck out. Neither one really stuck out, but neither one really hurt their draft stock either. But overall, it looks like a B+, A- week for both of these guys.
It was a B+, A- week, but I'll be honest, Herbert's game comes in right around a B for me. To me, in this game, the quarterback that played the best was probably Anthony Gordon. And if you got beat out by Anthony Gordon in this game, I mean, he had 3 touchdowns in the third quarter and was just lighting it up with ball placement, showed a lot of good touch and was efficient. I don't want you 5th overall. I'm sorry.
That's actually absolutely true as far as Gordon. And I don't think we're going to see another Gardner Minshew when it comes with him. With Herbert and Love, when it comes to Justin Herbert, and I've said this for quite a while, there are a few things that there are 4 or 5 plays in each game that I watch of him at Oregon, and I've seen so many games of him over the last few years, just wanting to like this guy, but I can't. And one example during the game, it took place on a 2nd and 12 play, and Herbert was 6 for 6 at this point with a touchdown, and it was a dump off, but whatever. He rolls out. He goes to the right, runs, tucks it down, and slides for a 2-yard loss when he very easily could have thrown the ball out of bounds. That's the type of player I see all the time with Justin Herbert. I mean, we've said for years when Ryan Tannehill was here that if you just build the right offense around him, maybe he would have a little bit more of a chance. And the Titans seem to do that. I think if you try to build an offense around Justin Herbert, I'm not sure if it would work, because I don't even think he can do the same things Tannehill did when he was here.
The thing I dislike most about Herbert, and I know we're talking about the Senior Bowl, the week leading up to the Senior Bowl, when I go back and watch tape on Herbert in college, and I got asked about this on Twitter because I know I was pretty harsh on him a few weeks ago. The thing that I see when I watch Justin Herbert play is he puts a lot of balls in places that you may be able to get away with in college, but you're not going to get away with on a regular basis in the NFL. He throws a lot of interceptable balls that just didn't happen to be picked off, and a lot of them his guy caught. But the ball placement and where he puts it is not something he's going to get away with at the next level. And that's something that is going to utterly destroy him unless somebody can somehow coach up a guy that, as you put it, slides for a 2-yard loss when he could throw the ball out of bounds. That doesn't scream coachable to me if you're a senior in college and still don't understand that basic facet of the game.
Or it's just a lack of awareness of where he is on the field. And again, we wouldn't be mentioning
that's not good either.
No, it's not good. And we wouldn't be mentioning this if it weren't obvious in all the games we saw from him. And the other part of me thinks maybe with Justin Herbert, we're overthinking this a little bit. The guy's, 6'5", 6'6", 230 pounds, has a rocket for an arm, and he just needs to get to the right coach. I mean, that's the counter argument for this. But I tend to see a player that is dropping little by little as the draft approaches, but somebody may fall in love with in the top 5 or 10 picks of the draft. And let's be clear, according to most reports, he had a very solid week, and he had a he had very good interviews too, where he really spoke out against the stereotype that he was an introverted person. But I can't ignore what I see there on film about the just lack of feel for the game. Now, in the other part, Jorden Love, I think, does have a very good feel for the game. I mean, he's 6'4", 225 pounds, doesn't quite play to that size. And at Utah State this past year, 20 touchdowns, 17 interceptions. But the skills and the tool set is definitely there. He can make every throw in the book. He moves his feet very well. And he's somebody that with a little bit of coaching, maybe in a Chan Gailey offense, could be a star in this league.
He absolutely could. I struggle a little bit at the idea of taking him number 5 because of some of the risks involved when it comes to him. I struggle at the idea of moving up to get him, that's for sure. There's only one quarterback I'd move up to get in this draft. But I do think Jorden Love has a hell of a lot more potential than Herbert does. And the issues I see with Jorden Love are a lot more coachable than the issues I see with Justin Herbert. And that's where he's definitely above and beyond for me.
You bet. We've got a lot of time to talk about the quarterback position in the upcoming months. We'll keep it right there for now. Another big part of this week was the best overall player, at least non-quarterback best overall player at the Combine, and that was Javon Kinlaw from South Carolina. 6'5", 315 pounds, and he practiced on Tuesday and Wednesday and was just throwing people around, except for one interior lineman that we'll get to a little bit later. But right now on my consensus draft board, and it's something that I put together every year that combines throughout the draft process, 8 different draft nicks from Mel Kiper and Todd McShay and several others. It looks like with Javon Kinlaw, he's the 10th overall prospect on that board. And a lot of this is because of how he played here and he practiced in the Senior Bowl. He looks kind of like a DeForest Buckner type, and somebody that in this defense next to Davin Gotcha and Christian Wilkins, if the Dolphins found any way to get him or trade up for him, or if he uncharacteristically, fell to the 18th pick, maybe a steal there.
It wouldn't be a stretch for him to still be there at 18. And that would be absolutely a steal, as you just alluded to. I mean, to anybody other than Omar Kelly, who's impressed with who the big guy is, whatever his name is, just being a little tongue-in-cheek there for those that have seen some of that out on Twitter. Kinlaw is a dominant force in the middle, and that defensive tackle rotation that Miami would have, and I'm pretty sure Brian Flores would find a way to get all three on the field in some situations with Kinlaw, Christian Wilkins, and Davin Godchow would be a complete and total force for Miami's defense. It would push that pocket back, which would allow Miami to do a little bit more fun things with some edge rushers if they get them that can just bend the corner and not have to worry about where that quarterback's going to be. So, I mean, he could completely add another facet to Miami's defense if they're able to grab him at 18.
And to piggyback on that, too, if Javon Kinlaw, the Dolphins find a way to get him after they get the quarterback at 5, if that happens, then I think you're going to see Kinlaw and Godchow and Christian Wilkins on the field for a lot of snaps, not just on first and second down, but on third down too. I think these are going to be the three pillars of your defense, and then from that point, they're going to use the outside linebackers and inside linebackers to create pressure from that point, as long as it's not in addition to all the other blitz packages that would be put in place.
Absolutely. I know we could talk about Kinlaw all day, but I know we've got a ton of guys we want to get to. I mean, there's so many fun things they could do with Kinlaw.
All right, so Josh Jones at offensive tackle, interesting guy out of Houston. This is somebody that came into the week with a lot of interesting opinions on him, because I've never seen a player that should be pretty well defined by draftniks at this point that everybody's all over the board on. I mean, for example, Dane Brugler from The Athletic, somebody I like a whole lot, has him as the 31st overall player in the draft. PFF has him as the 18th overall player. But Todd McShay and Tony Pauline have him as a 5th or 6th round pick. And you're talking about a 4-year starter out of Houston who played in a very pass-heavy offense there at Houston. Now, he didn't come in heavier or as tall as I thought. He was 6'5" instead of 6'7", but he played left tackle, played right tackle during the week, also played right guard, where he did this AC Slater type of body slam against one of the defensive tackles there. I mean, right now, Josh Jones, for me, I've got to stand pat and say that if he's there at 18, I probably take him, unless the Dolphins move up for a Javon Kinlaw. But a lot could change from here until the draft.
For me, I'd wait till 26 for him. It's he and Matt Pert both have their question marks, but the long-term projection on both of them, I think, is fairly similar. For Pert, it's somebody that needs to add a little mass and strength and a little bit of technique refinement. For Jones, I want to like the guy. I really do. But he just feels like a question mark, and I can't always put my finger on it with him. That's 18's a little too rich for my blood there. And I think he's probably gone by 26, but he could very realistically still be on the board.
Yeah, I mean, based on what's set out there right now, I'm not sure where the guy goes. I mean, I've seen some players fall from especially at offensive tackle, fall from first round down to third, fourth round. I mean, Morgan Moses a couple of years ago, there was a bad feeling about him, and he fell down. Orlando Brown a couple of years ago was a top 20 lock 3 months before the draft, and all of a sudden, he's fallen down to the end of the third round. So one thing I'm a little unsure about with Josh Jones is that he doesn't have a very wide base, and he's been in a very pass-heavy type of offense there. So it will be interesting to see how he performs at the combine and how he interviews. So those are the two main players, Kinlaw and Josh Jones, that are non-quarterbacks that people have been talking about here on Dolphins Twitter. But also interior offensive line and edge rusher showed a lot of depth this past weekend. And at edge rusher, there are several players that really stuck out, especially for you, Paul.
There really were. I mean, it's. I was hoping you were going to the interior offensive line, but we can go with the edge rusher first. I mean, Alton Robinson, we'll start with him. He had a rough week, but he did show up a little bit in the game. I mean, there were a lot of sacks from the edge in this game, and Robinson came up with 2 of those. But 2 guys that I've been taking or really 3 guys that I've been taking in a lot of mock drafts, and they're all very different players, but they can all get to the quarterback. Bradley and I will start with him. When he and Josh Uche were on the field, they just destroyed the pocket. They absolutely prevented anything for Hurts, and we really weren't even able to get a feel for Jalen Hurts in this game because these 2 were so disruptive coming off the edge. I think they had back-to-back sacks that they combined for on 2 plays. Anai was in there on 3 different sacks, and really, I've loved everything about him. I kind of wanted him to stay below the radar, but then you look on the other side of the field as well. It's the 2 of them played so well in sync with Josh Uche. There just wasn't a pocket with the 2 of them on the field. There was nothing that the opposing offense could do because they were bending it so well out there. Another guy that really I've liked, I've taken a little bit later in a lot of drafts, is Kenny Willekes. I believe he had 2 sacks in this game. He destroys the run. He has if you go off the measurables, it's going to be a joke. I mean, he's got short arms, which we all know. You can physically see it when he's standing there. He's not going to be the fastest guy out there, but the kid plays with a motor. He's got a great set of spin moves and feel for the game. And he's able to get off blocks. He's able to defend the run. And while he may not be that guy that wins the underwear Olympics, make no mistake, Willekes is a football player. He's one that's going to last a little bit later and allow you to strengthen that interior of the offensive line that we're going to get to, because of the fact that he will still be on the board when they pick later. And he feels like a Flores type player, somebody that just grabs their lunch pail, goes out there and does their job. And if you watch him, you can't help but like what you see.
Yeah, and when you look at the Dolphins have expected to be 3 fifth-round picks, that seems like the sweet spot for him as far as being a rotational player. I mean, this is somebody with 20 and a half tackles for loss at Michigan State. And he had a lot of very good plays during the week, too. I mean, somewhere he absolutely demolished the offensive tackle. But there were also some plays where he got a little bit wiped out, too. So, but he is a football player. You're exactly right on that. And to piggyback on a few of the edge rushers that you mentioned there, I mean, Bradley and when I turned on the tape of him, it's not so much of what he did during the Senior Bowl game, but I went back to the USC game, and he went up against Austin Jackson, who's supposed to be a 2nd or 3rd round pick in this draft at left tackle, and I thought he really got the better of him. I mean, he can beat you in a lot of ways. At 6'4", 265, he can not only use his heavy hands to win inside and outside, he can run the arc, he can drop back into coverage if need be. He seems like a Brian Flores player to me too. And from the University of Michigan, Josh Uche, a real fire plug, undersized, and I think he's a little bit stronger than people might believe. If you watch him against Tristan Wirfs and Alaric Jackson against Iowa, he's legitimately going at them and pushing them back. If you watch the tape on him, not to mention throughout the year, he's dropping back into coverage too. And Zach Bond is somebody that I wouldn't put as high as Bradley and but Zach Bond was from Wisconsin, and we all know how much the Dolphins love these Wisconsin linebackers. Throughout the week, he made it very clear he's an off-the-ball linebacker. But he's also somebody, too, that had 13 and a half sacks and 13 and a half tackles for loss at the University of Wisconsin this past year. So a lot of interesting players along the front 7 at the Senior Bowl week. But the interior of the offensive line throughout the week was shown the depth of what this class really has, because going back to what the Dolphins have in the 4th and 5th round, expected to have 4 picks between, I don't know, picks 130 and 180. And you could see, Paul, some guards and some centers, maybe two of them, get picked by the Dolphins here based on what we showed this past week.
You really could, and I have to preface this with, I know a lot of you have heard me talk about Joe Burrow throughout the entirety of the season and the preseason even this past year. I know we've talked a lot about K'Lavon Chaisson. I know we've talked a lot about Grant Delpit and Christian Fulton and a handful of others. I am not an LSU homer. Just Ed Orgeron has been doing something extremely special down there in the Bayou. And God, they just have players after players after players in a way I've never even seen from Alabama walking into a draft. And that says a lot to me. I turn on the tape with these guys, and it's not just when they're playing together as a team, but if you watched early in the Senior Bowl and you watched Cushenberry and Damian Lewis playing together, it was like two Mack trucks leading the way for LaMichael Perrine. And I've got the two of them written on a board down in my office with big circles around them. I mean, the first thing on my game notes for both of them is the word want in huge, huge, huge letters. So it's you watch that touchdown run by Perrine and what the two of them did leading the way for him, unbelievably special.
Yeah, it is. And it's not just what they did in the game there. It's not just how in sync they are as teammates, because they're probably going to be apart as teammates. But you're talking about two players that are 315 and 320 pounds and have been playing against big level competition. So to me, it's not with offensive linemen how much you just grill the person ahead of you. It's how infrequently you lose. And when you look at Lloyd Cushenberry and you look at Damian Lewis and you look at Jonah Jackson from Ohio State, who had a very good year as a pass protector for the Buckeyes, and also showed the same thing during the week, just rock solid. These are players that you might be able to get a little bit later. I think Cushenberry is probably going to end up being more that second round type of guy. But Damian Lewis, Jonah Jackson, these could be players that you find yourself getting in that third, fourth round area and turn out to be players that can contribute on day one.
They really, really are. And with Miami needing to remake the offensive line, I see a guard like Damian Lewis, and I know Jonah Jackson to a lesser degree. And it makes me a little more okay with it if Miami's only able to get either Scherf or Tooney in free agency. Suddenly, I'm not upset with the line play, and that's probably the biggest compliment that I can pay to Damian Williams and to a lesser degree to Jonah Jackson is it's a hell of a consolation prize for not getting one of those guys. And what I think this offensive line could be with a Cushenberry and a Lewis, or a Cushenberry and a Jackson, combined with either a Tooney or a Scherf, it could be pretty special right in the middle, somewhere that's been very weak for the Dolphins for a very long time.
It sure has. And a couple of fallers throughout the week, not just in the game, but really throughout the week, is Jalen Hurts, a quarterback. He's somebody that, just doesn't seem to have the timing down. And when he was with Alabama, I thought he was an undraftable prospect. And then he went to Oklahoma, played lights out, had a great year. And some people were projecting him as high as first or second round. I never quite got there. I wouldn't touch him before round 5. Jawan Jennings, as many receivers are stepping up here throughout the week, like Van Jefferson, like KJ Hill, like Denzel Mims, he certainly did not. Jared Pickney from Vanderbilt continues to just have a nightmare of an offseason, and really over the last year. And he's probably been passed by Adam Troutman from Dayton, as well as Harrison Bryant from Florida Atlantic at tight end. On the defensive side of the ball, we've talked about a lot of these guys that have stepped up. Jason Strobridge from North Carolina looked great in drills. 6'5", 280 pounds, can play defensive tackle, can play defensive end, and looks like he can put some heat on the quarterback. So we'll see how he tests out in the combine in addition to that. And at cornerback, Lamar Jackson and saying Busey from Wake Forest are two players I was expecting to take a very good close look at throughout the week, but the first 2 days were so bad for them I didn't even want to look anymore. But Paul, not a very eventful Senior Bowl this year. I mean, last year was exciting. You had so many players step up. Not quite this year, but also not a lot of players declining either.
No, and I will say, despite it not being the most exciting game, I mean, there were some exciting moments. There were some exciting moments during the week leading up. You mentioned KJ Hill had a hell of a week leading up to the game, even though he had a fairly quiet game outside of the punt return game. Another guy that did add an exciting moment in this game, Troy Pride Jr., somebody that I've been big on, the corner from Notre Dame. He's a guy that's listed fairly late, almost in undrafted territory on a lot of folks' boards, at least leading up to this week. Had a hell of a week in practice and got out there in the game. Had a little bit of a gimme interception, but he almost took it to the house. And the kid is not the biggest corner. He's fast. He's got great hips, field vision, got a great feel for the game. And he's somebody that I really would love for Miami to take later in the draft if he's sitting there maybe with one of those fifth-round picks. And then you look, there were a couple other guys I just wanted to mention. I know I mentioned LaMichael Perrine earlier. Very solid, underrated running back. Completely looked the part in that first quarter, and when he saw the field. Somebody that I think could be part of a platoon for Miami, potentially even better than part of a platoon in some scenarios. So he's a guy to really keep an eye on out of this game. And then one thing that we've talked about a great deal this offseason, and something that I think is a lot deeper than a lot of folks realize, is the safety position. I know a lot of folks are high on Isaiah Simmons. The likelihood of Miami getting Simmons is fairly crap at this point. I don't think they get Simmons. I know there's talk about trying to take a quarterback at 5. Simmons won't be there at 18. But a consolation prize, while he's not as good, could be Jeremy Chin, who is a complete and total flex piece out there. I know he's moving around on a few people's boards. Outside of that, you've got Jalen Elliott, who was paired with Troy Pride for Notre Dame, who had a very good game, very good week. And Kyle Duggar is somebody that is coming out of left field for a lot of folks. But really, you watch him play, you watch tape on Duggar, and the guy is a monster. And that's not even counting the safeties that are out there and will be available in the mid to late rounds. Miami could potentially focus on the offensive line early in this one, which I know isn't exciting for a lot of folks, and be able to fill so many positions of need later on, as well as pad some positions of strength like wide receiver with guys like KJ Hill and some of the others that'll be there later that we saw in this game. So there are so many storylines to talk about out of this game. I know we can't hit them all. I just wanted to make sure we touched on these guys because there's a lot to like there. And some of these are guys that I've been high on and taking in a lot of the mock drafts I've done already.
Yeah, typically, I always say that the Dolphins should not box themselves in to just drafting 3 or 4 offensive linemen. This year might be a little bit different. I mean, not just from what we've been talking about today, but in the first, you've got really special offensive tackles coming into this draft as far as how deep the class is. I mean, Andrew Thomas from Georgia, Tristan Wirfs from Iowa. I mean, Jedrick Wills from Alabama. I mean, and Mekhi Becton from Louisville. I mean, we could be talking about 4 offensive tackle talents in the top 10, and one of those has the likelihood of falling down to that 18th pick. And then you've got depth at the second round with guys like maybe Josh Jones, maybe Lloyd Cushenberry, and then 3rd, 4th, 5th round with those pure guards, which the Dolphins also need. So this would be a possible year that I would be interested in using a lot of these picks on the offensive line. But a lot can change between now and then. That will do it for our breakdown of the Senior Bowl. and the week leading up to it. You can follow Paul and I on Facebook, Twitter, Spreaker, iTunes, YouTube, iHeartRadio, and Spotify. I'm Brian Cat NFL. Paul is Fanatic_pick on Twitter. And if it's not on the right side and it's not on the left side, it is on the FinSide. Solo D, take us home.
It ain't the left side or the right side, then it must be the FinSide. It ain't the left side or the right side, then it must be the FinSide. Listen, Dolphins fans across the land all tuning in to see what Brian Cat and Paul about